The conversation continues.
How ridiculously complicated they've tried to make this global warming argument.
Today's News Talk, The World Today.
And back, thank you for your company. It's late in the early evening, depends what time you go to bed, in New York. And it's 7 after 9 here in Australia and 7 after 11 in New Zealand. Before we get into our guest, I just want to go through a couple of things in Australia, which I was talking to a guy yesterday. The word is hypocrite. And I think Grant Newsham actually mentioned that yesterday. The word that used to be shunned is now embraced by politicians. We see that Labor, the Labor Party in Australia, are pushing net zero, aiming for about 65-70% by 2035, and plonking up windmills all over the place, making life extremely difficult. Energy will be almost a thing of the past. All sorts of terrible, terrible things they're doing to the country. And you would think, though, that the Labor Party would be just to lead by example, just to show you that we are doing our bit to save the planet. They're not. Cam, can you play Labor MP?
This is a terrific thing. This is an opportunity for Australians to take charge of their own energy.
Do you have solar panels and batteries yourself?
I don't. I don't have solar panels or batteries, but plenty of Australians do, and that's a good thing.
So you don't have any solar panels or batteries? Sorry, just cut out there for a sec.
No, I don't. I don't have any solar panels or batteries.
As such a strong supporter of this move towards addressing climate change, perhaps should you?
Well, I'll take your advice, Andrew. I would think about it, but I think it's terrific that lots of Australians do. There are different circumstances that make it appropriate for some people to have them and other people not to have them. It depends a bit on the tenure of your housing situation. It depends a little bit on your preferences about how you use your vehicle, about how you use your home. I think for different Australians, different solutions will work for them, and I think it's a choice that all Australians have.
Hypocrisy. It lives on and on. Isn't it magnificent? Yeah, it's really great. Everybody's going to have it except me. I don't believe in it, but they will because we tell them it's going to save the planet. I was talking to, this is something I shouldn't do, talking to my brother the other day who believes actually my whole family believes in climate change. Must have been the water supply. Anyway. And we're saying, yeah, the oceans are rising, and I mentioned Tuvalu, which we're bringing everybody from Tuvalu over here because they're going to drown. The oceans are rising, except NASA says no, the landmass is growing, and so does other scientific research. What would they want with an island in the South Pacific? They want to put a base there. So why didn't they say that in the first place? And the other thing I mentioned to him, because he said, well, that doesn't mean it's that climate change isn't real. And then I said, the oceans are rising, again, said it twice, and in the entrance to Sydney Harbour, they put a mark there. I think it's Point Henningsen or something. Anyway, they put a mark there in 18-something where the ocean would rise to. And the headlines, tongue-in-cheek, was, oceans rise to 0.00%. In fact, it hasn't risen anyway. So I think, though, that the public still is buying it. Got to have the scary music behind the news bulletins. Got to have that look of oh, we're going to die. Professor Flannery said the oceans are going to rise, going to drown us all years ago. And he bought a house on the water. But guess what? The lovely media did not report that. How dare we point out the truth? So anyway, so the other thing is Matt Canavan. I think Matt Canavan, as a senator in Australia, is just simply magnificent. And he should be Prime Minister one day. He won't be because he tells the truth. Cam, can you play Matt, please?
As the Prime Minister pointed out yesterday, by nixing net zero, are you saying that climate change isn't real?
What an absurd thing to say. I mean, net zero emissions is a plan that's 3 years old. I mean, no one had ever heard of net zero emissions until 7 or 8 years ago. There's no magic about the 2050 figure. It's just an arbitrary year that's been chosen. And as I say, it's a massive socialist plan. Net zero emissions by 2050 means that the government has to direct how you drive, what you can eat, how we make power, how we make everyday things, the whole thing. They plan the whole economy. Now Joseph Stalin only did 5-year plans. This government thinks it can do 25-year plans. They're just not it just don't work. These sort of socialist plans never work, and this one is not working. Because how about the Prime Minister simply deliver on what he promised? How about he does that instead of raise these ridiculous points to distract attention from the fact that he hasn't lowered power prices like he said he would. He said his net zero plan would cut your power bill by $275. Now they don't even have any plan to lower energy prices. They've instead gone up massively. He said, the Prime Minister said, that by signing up to net zero emissions, we'd have these wonderful new industries that would create thousands of more jobs in critical minerals and hydrogen. The hydrogen situation is a complete mess, a massive waste of taxpayer dollars. And even on the critical minerals side of things, we've lost our nickel industry since we signed up to net zero. That's not happening either. So rather than insulting other people, why doesn't the Prime Minister just deliver what he said he would do?
Can't. There I am. He can't. He's a liar. He's a hypocrite. As Great Newsham said, they are embracing this new description. We're hypocrites. It's nuts. The whole world is nuts. Cam, if you can get ready, Digital EU. I want to play that in just a second. I want to just mention, because we're filling in at the moment, I want to just mention about the whole world is going to become digital. Well, Western world anyway. Everything. You'll be able to check your biometrics. Pass. You go that way, Mr. Ryan, off the cliff with the rest of us. So they're going to bring in all these things, your banking, CBCDs, all that sort of stuff, and we're going to find ourselves into in terrible, terrible situation, because you'll have no privacy, you'll have no anonymity if you don't do all these things, do what they tell you to do. You'll be shunted out, not part of society, and you won't have any money, probably any food, anywhere to stay. They're going to rule your lives. But we did go on about this years ago, a couple of years ago. In fact, we haven't stopped going on about it. And it's one of my pet subjects. This is going to happen. Well, guess what? October is when they say it will happen in the EU. Look what happens around October, November, December. In Australia, for example, we have the e-safety commissions and elbows, invention or initiative. I won't say initiative because that's a positive thing to the world. That is, you have to use biometrics or some sort of way of logging in every time you go to YouTube, something like that. I'm a robot. So your privacy will go. We have digital IDs being bought in all over the place. Look at the UK. They are ramping up their social misinformation exercises, and they're going to create all sorts of havoc. Then you have in the US, you have the Defence Department saying now that any journo that does any work with them has got to make sure you show us first what you're writing, in case we don't like it. So there's censorship. And we have Pam Bondi, also James Bondi, Pam Bondi, 007 3/4. She is saying that we have to rule out hate speech, yet they're pushing this no censorship, free speech. Look at Starmer. We have free speech, and if you disagree with that, we'll jail you. So there you are. Not really, but that's how ridiculous. But back to the digital EU. Now, Cam, if you could play that, please.
And hopefully campaigning enough with all the stakeholders, meaning European Parliament, meaning European Council, meaning European Commission, so that we can eventually, not put to bed, but put to reality this digital euro. The deadline for us is going to be October of 25, and we are getting ready for that deadline, but we will not be able to move unless the other parties, the stakeholders, as I call them, Commission, Council and Parliament actually complete the legislative process, without which we will not be able to move. And I think it is critically important, and it seems to the agnostic or the skeptics, it seems to be more relevant and more of an imperative now than ever before, both on the wholesale and on the retail level, both.
So there you are. Exciting, isn't it? Not. It's terrible. It's terrible. We have the very few are destroying the planet. There is no doubt that the Victorian Premier in Australia is destroying Victoria, and that's with the Belt and Road Initiative. There is no doubt that the Labor government is destroying the entirety of Australia. There is no doubt that the elite who are controlling various parts of our financial systems and government are setting out to destroy the entire world. It's all about power, isn't it? This is the world today.
Telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, the world today.
Okay, we're back again. It's all happening. Our guest is Dr Matt Shelton from New Zealand, from NZDSOS. And it's a very interesting time in the world, because we see that Tylenol, the old headache tablet, is under the microscope, along with many other things brought out by the drug manufacturers, which we might even touch on too. Matt, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Mike, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you, sir. Can you just tell me about the Tylenol furor?
Sure. I mean, we've got a number of things going on here, but of course, this morning during one of our meetings, we were actually watching the live stream from the States, and I mean, this is really quite significant, for a number of reasons. But for us, the takeaway is that people have been using Panadol for 50, 60 years. Paracetamol, Tylenol, acetaminophen, whatever you want to call it. And this has never been raised before, except it has. There have been some studies showing that using Panadol after childhood vaccinations seemed to be a statistical risk for the later development of autism. But here we are with medicine using its traditional kind of conservative advice around, well, look, don't take anything in pregnancy unless you can avoid it. But if you need some painkillers, maybe a little bit of Panadol's okay. But don't take anything that you really don't need. And then along comes the mRNA jabs, which have been given with abandon and with sort of reckless caution thrown to the wind. And the advice, well, certainly in New Zealand anyway, that it's safe in all stages of pregnancy, with no safety data. In fact, evidence of harm that Pfizer had and sat on, and multiple sort of plausible mechanisms, in theory at least, that were worrying some of us before the first jab was ever given. So there's a real contrast here. But the really interesting thing from listening to Trump and Secretary Kennedy was that both of them said, look, we're going to be looking at vaccines too. There's a question to answer, and we'll be doing a lot more research. But the doctor scientists that came on stuck firmly to just talking about Tylenol or Panadol. So it doesn't really wash with us, and a number of commentators whose names we know and people we follow have already come out and said, look, this is just a smokescreen. And the sort of the truth will come out. But it's it may seem a sort of a small step as far as the COVID vaccines goes, but it's actually quite seismic that a sitting US president and the boss of the sort of highest profile health system on the planet, are both have both used the V word in relation to vaccinations, to autism. I beg your pardon.
It's interesting. The headlines with USA Today says Trump urges pregnant and women. So pregnant and women, so it must be okay for a bloke, to avoid Tylenol, citing unproved autism link. So obviously they're slanting it a bit. Why would they say Trump urges pregnant and women to avoid Tylenol. What about the gentleman of the species? And why doesn't he just say, don't take it for anyone?
Well, look, I guess that's the spin of the news organisation that are putting out what he said, of course. And I mean, wokeism is everywhere. I mean, it's gone crazy. But look, if there are any men out there who are actually pregnant, then they should avoid Tylenol too. It does cause significant oxidative stress, and it depletes glutathione in anybody that takes it for quite a while, actually. Some studies in children have suggested up to 50 days, but I have to be a little bit careful because I don't have a practicing certificate, so I'm not telling anybody to take or not take anything. But it's interesting, the spin that will probably accelerate, and no doubt the further criticism that will be heaped on top of all of them for daring to undermine the sort of the biggest sacred cow in medicine, I suppose, which has been vaccination. But one of the things we've observed too is that people who were dyed in the wool supporters of vaccination and never gave it a second thought their whole professional careers through worrying about the COVID jabs and their level of data before they were given, and then seeing the clear rise in serious damage and deaths that these things have caused to some people, have then turned their attention to the bigger question of vaccination, and have become, avowed anti-vaxxers because they found, there wasn't safety data, there was never any true placebo-controlled trials, we never looked at what the individual vaccines might be doing, and in fact, evidence that did crop up that there were dangers was just ignored or suppressed. So we could be seeing a sea change now in the ability to have these conversations and to get some actual proper science done, and to give the opportunity to the medical profession, to do the right thing and say, well, hey, maybe we've been duped as well, and we were always told that they were so safe we didn't even talk about it. We didn't know that studies weren't done. We assumed they were because we were always told to just go forth and vaccinate. So I think this is a very, very important day, or at least I hope it turns out to be.
What it is doing, even though there is the obvious slur from the mainstream and I would imagine some of the medical fraternity, it is getting us talking about it. With the past administrations and government policy, no one could talk about it, and still in many countries you can't talk about a decision by the government to go forward with something or not to go forward. If you spoke against that decision, then they're going to go after you. So at least we're talking about it. And that's what science is all about, because science is never settled. It will keep changing and changing and changing. It says here, as he promoted an unproven link between the painkiller and a rise in autism in children. That is Robert Kennedy's, one of his, if he wants a legacy, that's probably one of the ones that he would like to have as his legacy, to not get rid of totally, because you can't do that, but reduce the number of cases of autism. And he's saying that Tylenol has a particular drug in it which I cannot pronounce. It's associated with an increased risk of autism, and that women should avoid the painkiller during pregnancy and don't give it to your children, newborn children. And again, the wording, it's wrong. It says you can't give it to pregnant women. You can't give it to women. It doesn't mention guys or children. Don't give it to the newborn, but it doesn't mention any other ages. So the media release and what they're putting out probably needs to be a lot more thorough than it is, because there are all these great gaping holes. But back to what I said in the first instance, is that they are talking about it. How important is it to talk about medical changes or new medicines or directions in physical health and that sort of stuff? It's very important, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's bizarre that we're even having to, ask the question and have this discussion. I mean, of course it's important. Look, I mean, some things in science are settled. I mean, there's a lot we haven't got a clue about, and there's a lot that we're fairly confident about, and there are some things that are absolutely settled. And one is that all medical interventions, certainly all those that don't come from nature and are deliberately made to be different from anything in nature so they can be patented, are going to cause problems. They're designed to change something, to move the body away from its natural state of balance, to provoke it or to block something or whatever. The term is they're unavoidably unsafe, and we should just be, cool about that. But the fact, I think it is seismic that, there will now be a conversation. But you haven't half picked a hot potato to try and start talking about, because, all of medicine is based essentially on this trust, the idea that before somebody suggests we take something or gives us a prescription or injects something into us, the work's been done to assess the risk benefit profile. And if, the holy cow of medicine, the sacred cow rather, of vaccination turns out to be based possibly on smoke and mirrors, or at the very least, there's a whole bunch of work that was never done and needs to be done. As Stanley Plotkin, who was the grandfather of vaccination, said last year, he acknowledged, look, we need a lot more funding so we can do some long-term safety studies and do some placebo-controlled trials and look at these things in isolation. And that's got to start undermining, perhaps other things in the public's mind too, that and hopefully many doctors, that we've taken for granted. We know that publishing and peer review, has been very vexed, and as soon as pharma gets involved, objectivity goes out the window. And how do we know what to trust? Well, you can't trust an area where you're not allowed to talk about, for a start. So I see this as the beginning of I would imagine a sort of a managed campaign to try and gradually educate the public without alarming them or without unloading a sort of sea of anger, even if they perceive that we've basically been lied to or duped, all the way along. Because I mean, the pushback could be very spectacular.
It's interesting days. Of course, I was just reading here, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists both endorsed using, now I'll probably get this wrong, it's acetaminophen. How do you pronounce that word quickly? Help me out here.
Acetaminophen. I mean, paracetamol is what we all know it as.
Yeah, okay. And so they're endorsing it during pregnancy, and here we have the president and Robert Kennedy Jr. saying, don't. You should not do it. And they're still saying unproven results, but who knows? I think at least we're talking about it now. And if there is a possibility of a link to autism, then let's explore it. Matt Shelton, always a pleasure to chat with you from NZDSOS. What other socials is the group on?
We're on Facebook, Twitter. I think we're on Instagram now. So our websites will take you to all of those. We have to be on them all because we're variably, suppressed, shadow banned, choked at different times, of course, to try and hide the messages.
We often say if we had an interview with God, nobody would know about it because they just shut us. I mean, YouTube is trying to shut us down, and the others. It's really ramped up now. We must have been very bad people in our past lives. Matt, thank you very much for your time. It gives me a headache. Now I can't take my headache tablets. Good on you. And a glass of water and maybe an apple. This is The World Today.
The conversation continues.
How ridiculously complicated they've tried to make this global warming argument.
Today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back. Mike Netter is a very good friend of ours. He's vice chair of Rebuild California. In fact, maybe he could help rebuild Phillips 66 Refinery. They're shutting down the Phillips 66 LA Refinery. For what reason?
Well, Mike, let's be clear about. I want to start off this segment a little bit different and even comment on your last segment, which is the tweet your producer sent me about. They're shutting down the refineries in California because the oil companies have kind of had it with California regulations. What strikes me as rather bizarre is they're shutting down the refineries because California is still consuming a lot of oils. We're getting much of our oil through India. Who gets it through Russia? Don't tell anybody. We're not supposed to know that. And so we're still consuming the same amount, but Gavin Newsom and his Democratic cronies think it's going to be way better if we simply bring it in and no one will notice because it makes the environmentalists feel better. The problem I'm having over the last 24, 36 hours is I'm a little bit confused as to how much sheep that the left are acting like sheep. And I'm not meaning to insult the intelligence of sheep. I'm actually insulting the intelligence of the left. Here's where I'm a little bit challenged and confused. The Jimmy Kimmel show, as you know, was yanked off the air, suspended, and reinstated today for absolutely obnoxious comments you would be thrown out of almost anywhere on that he made on the Charlie Kirk assassination. Yet the left and the unions are protesting against it. Now, the Jimmy Kimmel show, and I'm getting back to the original point here, employs about 24 people. There's about 100 temps that come in each night, and everybody is up in arms about this. The refineries that are shutting down employ about 2,000 people. Now, with Jimmy Kimmel going back on the air, I did get text today from both his viewers. They're very happy to hear about that because the reality is Kimmel doesn't have many viewers. Everybody knows that. I put out all the charts on my X feed at Netter Mike. But you would think that the people would be protesting in California against the refinery shutting down because gasoline, and this is not a big economic lesson for everybody out there, you produce less gas, the gas you have, and you still consume it, the price goes up. It seems that the people that are on the left side of the spectrum, going back to autism, and apparently, well, everybody could probably tell my parents may have dropped me when I was born, may have thrown me down, no one's quite too sure, but let's just put that down for a second. The left just seems to go along with what anybody says they should be protesting while ignoring the big picture. Why aren't there protests against the refinery shutting down? Why is a staff of a couple dozen people that literally, are you ready for this, Mike Ryan? Are you ready?
I am.
23,000 people per episode watch the Jimmy Kimmel show. That's not very many. That's almost as many as I have more people watch my podcast. I'm literally getting 2 million views a week on my social media, and nobody will protest if they try to shut me down. So why are people protesting it? Yet almost there's 25 million adults in California that use gasoline. The left is just so busy to jump in this. I'd like to comment on your last segment if I could too.
You can, please do.
Thank you. I really wasn't, I'm just trying to let you take a breath there, but thanks for permission. This is how ridiculous it's become. That today, when the Trump administration, simply because they're the Trump administration, wanted to put out a warning against acetaminophen, blah, 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 which is Tylenol, saying, be careful, pregnant women, when you take it. Yale and Harvard, which are two leftist institutions, but still sometimes still do legit stuff, said, be careful, there's a chance that it may cause autism. Mike Ryan, can I ask you a question? Did you read the memo that the FDA put out?
No, I didn't actually.
No, you didn't. And neither did ABC, NBC, CBS, or the rest of these, hold on, beep, 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 expletive deleted son of a guns, that they simply said, oh my God, it's not been proven. All the FDA memo said is we want to put a warning label on the bottle that says, hey, if you're pregnant, don't gulp it like it's butterscotch candy because it may cause autism. Immediately, the press, just like with Jimmy Kimmel, can't wait to respond simply because Donald Trump and his administration put it out. We've simply become a society less and less of facts, less and less of things worrying about everyday life, and more of the left continuing just to revolt against anything the right is saying. Look, if I go to anybody on the street, and you could trust me on this one, and I go, hey, got a question for you. Yeah, how you doing? Like the last dad there. I'm going to imitate his accent. I'll go, how'd you feel about when you just fueled up down there at the Chevron station? I've never had anybody answer, I'm going to be honest with you. I think I got away with it. I paid too little. I don't think I paid enough for my gasoline. Nobody wants to pay more for gas. And in California, we average almost 40% more than the rest of the country. My questions are, where are the protests on that? 2,000 people are out of a job. And by the way, for the couple dozen people which are out of the job on Jimmy Kimmel, they can go to another studio and film the same thing. If you have a job working at an oil refinery, it's not that transferable a skill set where you just could go down the block and get a job somewhere else. My big question is, why isn't the public paying attention? And the big answer really is that too much of the people are being influenced by the news, not watching shows like this, but more and more the momentum is gathering. But the news, if you haven't noticed, ABC, NBC, CBS are reporting on a show that's a headline that no one's watching. Yes, indeed, you heard correctly, right? There could have been a skull crashing thing and an NFL football game or even European soccer match where literally 10 times the amount of people were watching in whatever you want to define as a quarter, as a half, and less people are watching the Jimmy Kimmel show, but the press feels obligated to report on it because they say we're suppressing free speech. How about we just bring back civility and common sense? And that's part of the problem that we have. Back to you, Mike Ryan.
No, I was just enjoying it very much. I'm just thinking I was very familiar with that, having been in LA for a chunk of my life. And you are right. You're dead right about what the media is doing. But it's the same around the world. And we basically have a couple of owners of most of the world's media. And you're right about Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel, no one was watching him. As simple as that. I mean, take away his putrid act on in front of the camera, but the rest of it is no one watches him. And even though he was putrid, I mean, he probably didn't offend anyone because nobody was watching him. I mean, the guy is truly a loser. But I did see somewhere, I caught just a quick headline or a byline that he is moving to Disney. Now, can you qualify?
No. Disney, let me be clear on that. What happened is that Disney owns ABC. All the major alphabet networks, to say they're in a tank would again be insult to the empty oil tanks. CBS was just bought and merged with Skydance, is owned by Paramount. NBC is owned by Disney. ABC is owned by Disney and NBC is owned by Universal. They continue to merge and move forward because the reality is, and this is really what I want to spend my last few minutes on, that everybody has to understand.
No, I have actually headlines. Hang on. Make the sound effects. Dee, 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 dee. Late night host Jimmy Kimmel this is my American accent, has revealed who his first guest will be upon his return to television tomorrow after Disney's decision to end his suspension. And it's hard to read it as anything other than a bit of a up yours to critics, including the president. He's bringing on Gavin Newsom. That's his first guest. So he is back tomorrow.
Well, I don't know what to tell you because if you're that hard up for ratings that you have to bring on Gavin Newsom, who frankly the majority, let me rephrase this and put this into numbers, and I've only got, I believe, about 4 minutes left. Is that correct? Okay, so let me phrase this for you. There are 22 million registered voters, 18 million that have ever voted in California. In the gubernatorial primaries, there will be about 7 million turnout aggregate for all the candidates. this, okay? Gavin Newsom and his Hollywood bonkers buddies are talking to each other. The Prop 50 and everything else which is coming out right now, I've said this before, the biggest party is the party of apathy. The biggest watcher today of TV is who cares? No one's watching. What I want the takeaway to be, though, and I think this is critically important, is that we still, shows like me, like I do, you do, we tend to let the press drive the narrative. We need to drive the narrative. Again, I'm not going to be a pop-up here, but I am. Right now, I'm averaging 2 million views a week on X. Yes, I realize they're not watching me for an hour and a half, but 2 million people are exposed to it. That too can be you, okay? I have a show that gets 50, 60,000 viewers a week, twice as many as the Jimmy Kimmel show, okay? But NBC, ABC, and CBS, because I'm not part of the cabal, what we used to call the mob or the Irish family, won't report on me, so they drive the narrative and we all talk about it. Here's the bottom line. Gavin Newsom could be on the Jimmy Kimmel show. No one cares, okay? Gavin cares because he needs attention, kind of like a crack addict needs crack, which is why he's doing other things I'm out of time to talk about. But here's what I want to stress. Everyone out there, you make a difference. Every time you even pick up your phone and go to whatever your brand of social media is, retweet, repost, or do something that's about conservatism. Because it's not about, oh my God, they're putting a label on Tylenol that could actually save a life. Here's what it's about. It's about common sense, you yahoos. Let's cut through this. Nobody wants a child to have autism because maybe they could take something which would hurt them. Nobody wants to pay too much for gas. And I still haven't met the person that goes, I'm paying way too little taxes and I feel guilty. We're simply about common sense. And we need to spread the word. That's what it's about. At Netter Mike on X, Mike Netter on LinkedIn. Yes, the people that have jobs. You'll find us on Facebook, Rebuild California, the Rebuild California site. And most importantly, subscribe to Netter News, my weekly newsletter. Blast out 60% Oprah rate. And Mike, it's free. And I can tell by looking at you, you have that kind of money.
Well, I have that kind of money, but apparently it's not legal. So I think it's called monopoly. But you know, I have to ask you. We had someone write into us. Which part of this conversation did Mike Netter breathe? Did you do it in one breath? It was amazing. It was just truly fantastic.
It's what I do, my friend. I was on KABC on a Friday. I have a lot of information to get out, and there's never enough time.
Absolutely fantastic. But I have to say and I can understand any company bringing back, like a Disney, to bring back Kimmel, because obviously they got so much money they don't really care what they do with it.
No, they're bringing back Kimmel because Kimmel is making $20 million a year. Colbert got canceled with slightly more viewers, making $40 million a year, okay? They don't want to pay Kimmel to have no revenue. This is a business deal. These companies are in business. People pay me because they're in business. It's really that simple. Yes, leftists run the network. Don't tell anybody. If they don't make money, the stockholders will fire them. And just like politicians, they don't want to lose their job.
Mike Netter, I have to say, absolutely amazing. Thank you very much for the late notice and all that sort of stuff, but well worth it because we've had a great conversation and we know that you can hold your breath for 15 minutes. By the way, this is, and goodbye, this is The World Today.